It's an emergency. Archangel Michael warns, a great tragedy is coming, open this now or you'll cry later. Listen to me now, beloved child of the divine, for what I am about to reveal to you in these precious moments cannot wait another second, cannot be postponed until tomorrow, cannot be ignored as just another message that crosses your path in this chaotic world where truth has become diluted and divine warnings have been reduced to mere whispers in the wind. I am Michael, the Archangel of Protection, the commander of heaven's armies, the one who stands at the right hand of the Most High, and I have been sent to you in this exact moment because there is something catastrophic approaching your life, approaching humanity, approaching the very fabric of reality as you know it, and the window of opportunity to protect yourself, to shield your loved ones, to secure your eternal soul is closing faster than you can possibly imagine. You did not stumble upon these words by accident, you did not click on this message by coincidence, you did not arrive here through random chance because there are no accidents in the divine plan, no coincidences in the cosmic design, no random encounters when the forces of heaven are orchestrating your awakening. Right now, as your eyes scan these words, as your heart begins to feel the weight of what I am communicating, there are spiritual forces both light and dark watching to see what choice you will make, whether you will heed this warning or dismiss it like so many others have done before you, only to find themselves weeping bitter tears of regret when the tragedy I speak of crashes into their lives with the force of 1,000 hurricanes and they realize too late that they had been given a chance. They had been offered protection, they had been extended divine mercy, but they chose to ignore it, chose to procrastinate, chose to believe that tomorrow would be soon enough when tomorrow never comes for those who wait. The heavenly realms are in a state of heightened alert right now. The angels are being dispatched in record numbers to those precious souls who still have ears to hear and hearts to receive, because what is coming is not a minor disruption, not a small challenge, not a temporary setback, but a fundamental shift in the spiritual and physical landscape of your world that will separate those who are prepared from those who are not, those who are protected from those who are vulnerable, those who listen to divine guidance from those who relied on their own limited understanding. I need you to understand with every fiber of your being that the forces of darkness have been planning their greatest assault on humanity. They have been coordinating their most devastating attack on the children of God. They have been preparing a tragedy so profound that it will shake the foundations of society and send shockwaves through every family, every community, every nation on this planet. And the only ones who will stand firm, who will remain unshaken, who will emerge victorious are those who take action right now, in this very moment, to align themselves with heavenly protection and divine intervention. You might be wondering why you specifically, why this message found its way to you out of billions of people on this earth. And the answer is devastatingly simple. You have been marked, you have been chosen, you have been identified by the divine as someone who still has the spiritual sensitivity to receive this warning and the potential to respond with the urgency it demands. But that potential means nothing if you allow fear, doubt, skepticism, or procrastination to steal this moment of grace from your hands. Every single second that ticks by as you read these words is a second closer to the manifestation of this great tragedy, Every moment of hesitation is a moment of opportunity lost. Every breath you take while remaining undecided is a breath that could have been used to cry out to heaven for the protection that is being offered to you right now without cost, without condition, without requirement except that you believe, that you receive, that you act upon what is being revealed to you in this sacred encounter between the divine and the human. I have walked the corridors of eternity, I have witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, I have seen the patterns of divine judgment and mercy repeated throughout history, and I am telling you with the full weight of my celestial authority that what is approaching matches the intensity of the great floods, the devastation of fallen kingdoms, the collapse of empires that thought themselves invincible but discovered too late that pride comes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. This is not religious rhetoric designed to manipulate your emotions. This is not spiritual theater meant to entertain your curiosity. This is not mystical language intended to sound impressive without substance. This is raw, unfiltered truth from the throne room of heaven delivered to you because you matter to the divine heart, because your life has purpose and destiny that cannot be fulfilled if you are swept away by the coming catastrophe, because there are people connected to your future who will never receive what they need from you if you fail to secure the protection being offered in these critical moments. The signs have been appearing all around you, but you have been too distracted by the noise of modern life to notice them, too consumed by daily routines to recognize them, too numb from information overload to feel their significance. The natural world has been screaming warnings through unprecedented disasters. The spiritual realm has been sending signals through increased supernatural encounters. The fabric of society has been showing cracks through chaos and confusion that seem to multiply by the day, and yet most of humanity sleeps on, oblivious to the storm that is gathering on the horizon with a fury that will spare no one who has not taken shelter under divine wings. I am not speaking to you as a distant cosmic force that has no understanding of human struggle. I am reaching out to you as the Archangel who has been assigned to protect humanity, who has fought battles in heavenly realms for the sake of human souls, who has witnessed countless times when people ignored divine warnings and suffered consequences that could have been completely avoided if they had simply listened, simply believed, simply acted when the opportunity for intervention was placed directly in their path. Your rational mind might be generating objections right now, creating arguments about why this cannot be true, constructing defenses against accepting something that seems too urgent to be real. But I am asking you to silence that voice of skepticism for just these few moments and allow your spirit to recognize what your soul already knows. Something is terribly wrong in your world. Something dark is approaching. Something catastrophic is brewing, and you need help from sources beyond your human capacity to handle what is coming. The tragedy I speak of will not announce itself with trumpets and advance warning to the masses. It will not send out press releases and schedule appointments for its arrival. It will not give those who are unprepared multiple chances to get their spiritual house in order before it strikes with devastating precision. It will come suddenly, like a thief in the night, like lightning that flashes across the sky without warning, like the flood that caught the ancient world unprepared because they dismissed the warnings of the righteous until the waters were already rising and the doors of safety were already shut. The specific nature of this tragedy has multiple dimensions. There are spiritual attacks being launched against the minds and hearts of believers. There are physical events being permitted because humanity has collectively turned away from divine truth. There are economic and social upheavals being orchestrated by forces that want to see humanity enslaved to fear and chaos. There are personal calamities being targeted at individuals who pose a threat to the kingdom of darkness through their potential to walk in divine purpose, and you, my beloved child, are in the crosshairs of at least one of these categories, or you would not be reading these words right now. The specificity will become clearer to you as you continue to engage with this message and open your heart to the revelation that heaven wants to download into your spirit, but the immediate action required is not dependent on understanding every detail. It is dependent on trusting that divine authority is speaking truth to you and responding with the urgency that the situation demands. I want you to pause for just a moment and feel the weight of what I am communicating to you. Allow the reality to penetrate beyond your intellectual processing and touch the core of your being, where spiritual truth resonates like a tuning fork responding to its matching frequency. Can you feel it? Can you sense the heaviness in the atmosphere around you even as you engage with these words? Can you detect the acceleration of your heartbeat, the heightening of your awareness, the stirring of something deep within you that recognizes divine communication when it encounters it? That is not psychological manipulation, that is not emotional manipulation, that is your spirit bearing witness with the spirit of truth that what you are receiving in this moment is authentic, is critical, is literally life-altering in ways you cannot yet fully comprehend but will understand with crystalline clarity in the days ahead when you look back on this moment and realize that everything changed when you made the decision to keep reading, keep receiving, keep responding to the urgent call of heaven that found you in your time of greatest need, even though you might not have realized you were in need until these words began to awaken you to the reality of your situation. Right, Jesus, I'll never turn away from you, if He is your forever love. Now that you have chosen to continue, now that you have demonstrated the spiritual courage to push past initial resistance and remain engaged with this divine communication, I can begin to unfold for you the layers of what is really happening in the invisible realms that surround your visible world. What is truly taking place in the cosmic battle between light and darkness that is reaching a critical crescendo in this particular season of human history, what is actually being orchestrated against you personally by forces that recognize the threat you pose to their agenda if you ever fully awaken to your divine identity and step into the fullness of your heavenly calling. The enemy of your soul has been studying you for years, documenting your weaknesses and vulnerabilities, cataloging your fears and insecurities, analyzing your patterns and behaviors, mapping your relationships and connections, and designing a customized strategy of destruction that targets the specific areas where you are most susceptible to attack, most likely to fall, most prone to give up and surrender to despair when the pressure becomes intense and the pain becomes overwhelming. This is not meant to terrify you into paralysis but to awaken you to the seriousness of the spiritual warfare that is raging around you, whether you acknowledge it or not, whether you believe in it or not, whether you have equipped yourself to engage in it or not, because the battle is real, the enemy is relentless. And the casualties among those who remain ignorant of these realities are mounting with heartbreaking regularity in every corner of the world. You have probably experienced strange attacks recently that seem to come out of nowhere, sudden bouts of depression that had no logical explanation, unexpected conflicts in relationships that had been stable, financial pressures that multiplied despite your best efforts to manage them, physical symptoms that doctors could not diagnose or effectively treat, mental confusion that made it difficult to focus or make clear decisions, spiritual dryness that left you feeling disconnected from the divine presence you once experienced so readily, and a general sense that something is working against you in ways that feel coordinated and intentional rather than random and coincidental. You are absolutely correct in that assessment because these are not random occurrences, they are strategic strikes designed to weaken you, isolate you, discourage you, and ultimately neutralize you before the great tragedy arrives, so that you will not be in a position of strength to withstand it, will not have the spiritual resources to overcome it, will not possess the divine protection to emerge from it unscathed, while others around you fall into destruction and devastation that will mark them for the rest of their lives. The forces of darkness know that if they can take you out before the main event, if they can diminish your faith before the ultimate test, if they can convince you to give up before the final battle, then you will be swept away with the masses who never stood a chance because they never knew to prepare, never thought to seek protection, never realized that divine help was available to those who would cry out for it with sincere and desperate hearts. But here is the glorious truth that the enemy does not want you to discover, the powerful reality that hell itself trembles at the thought of you learning, the transformative revelation that will shift everything in your favor if you can grasp it and hold on to it with unshakable conviction. You are not defenseless, you are not helpless. You are not abandoned to face this approaching tragedy with only your human strength and limited resources, because the same God who created the universe with a word, the same divine power that parted seas and toppled kingdoms, the same heavenly authority that raised the dead and healed the sick, the same supernatural intervention that has preserved faithful believers through every catastrophe in human history is available to you right now, in this moment, for the asking, for the receiving, for the activating through simple faith and sincere petition. The protection I am offering you on behalf of the divine throne is not theoretical, not symbolic, not metaphorical, but actual, tangible, measurable in its effects on your life and circumstances when you align yourself with it through the specific actions that I will reveal to you as we continue this sacred conversation. You need to understand that divine protection is not automatic simply because you consider yourself a good person or because you have believed in God at some point in your life. It requires activation through intentional engagement with heavenly authority, deliberate positioning under the covering of divine mercy, conscious choice to submit yourself to the guidance and direction of angelic forces that have been assigned to assist you in navigating the treacherous path ahead. The great tragedy that is coming has multiple fronts of attack that will be launched simultaneously to create maximum chaos and confusion, overwhelming the coping mechanisms of individuals and the organizational structures of society in ways that will leave people feeling utterly lost and desperate for solutions that the world system cannot provide. There will be financial collapse that wipes out the security people have built over lifetimes of work. There will be health crises that strike without warning and resist conventional treatment. There will be relationship betrayals that shatter trust and destroy families. There will be natural disasters that displace populations and create humanitarian emergencies. There will be technological failures that cripple infrastructure and communication. There will be spiritual deception on a massive scale that leads multitudes away from truth and into darkness. And there will be personal tragedies customized for maximum emotional and psychological impact on individuals who have been specifically targeted because of their spiritual potential or their connection to divine purposes that the enemy wants to prevent from being fulfilled. I am not painting this picture to induce hopelessness but to help you grasp the scope of what is approaching so that you will appreciate the comprehensiveness of the divine protection that is being offered and the absolute necessity of securing it before these events begin to manifest in your sphere of experience. Every major tragedy in human history has had survivors. Those who somehow made it through when others perished, those who were protected when others were destroyed, those who emerged from catastrophe while others were consumed by it, and the common thread among nearly all of them was that they received warning, they heeded direction, they took action based on information that came to them through dreams, through messengers, through internal knowing. Through divine intervention that they chose to honor rather than dismiss. You are receiving that same caliber of warning right now, you are being given that same quality of advance notice, you are being presented with that same opportunity for divine protection. And the only question that matters is whether you will respond like those who saved themselves and their families or like those who ignored the signs until it was too late and they found themselves caught in circumstances from which there was no escape and no rescue because the window of mercy had closed and the time of judgment had arrived. I need you to let this truth penetrate deeply into your consciousness. There is a window of opportunity for protection that is open right now but will not remain open indefinitely. There is a season of grace in which divine mercy is being extended, but that season has boundaries and limits. There is a moment of decision in which you can secure your spiritual safety, but that moment will pass and cannot be recaptured once the events are set in motion and the tragedy begins to unfold across the landscape of human experience. The compassion of the divine heart is what compels this warning. The love of heaven for humanity is what motivates this urgent communication. The desire of the Most High to see His children protected is what has sent me to you with this message that carries the weight of eternal consequences resting upon your response to it. God is not willing that any should perish but that all should come to safety under His wings. Not willing that any should be destroyed but that all should find refuge in His presence, not willing that any should suffer needlessly when protection has been provided and made available through the sacrifice of Christ and the ministry of angels who serve those who are heirs of salvation. But divine will does not override human choice, heavenly desire does not nullify human decision. supernatural protection does not activate without human cooperation, and this is why I am speaking to you with such urgency, such intensity, such passionate appeal for you to wake up from spiritual slumber and recognize that you are standing at a crossroads where the path you choose in the next few moments will determine whether you walk through the coming tragedy unscathed or whether you become one of its casualties, whether you emerge as a testimony of divine faithfulness or whether you become a cautionary tale of what happens when warning is ignored and grace is spurned. Let me now reveal to you the provision that heaven has made available for this exact moment in history, the divine strategy that has been prepared in advance for those who would find themselves facing this particular convergence of spiritual attack and earthly catastrophe, the supernatural protection plan that bears my seal as the Archangel of defense and carries the authorization of the throne room itself for activation in the lives of all who will receive it with faith and act upon it with obedience. This is not complicated spiritual technology that requires years of training to understand. This is not esoteric knowledge reserved for elite believers who have achieved certain levels of enlightenment. This is not mysterious ritual that demands perfect performance of ancient ceremonies, but rather simple, accessible, powerful truth that transforms circumstances when applied with sincere heart and unwavering confidence in the goodness and faithfulness of the God who has promised to be a shield and fortress for those who make him their refuge in times of trouble. The protection begins with recognition, with acknowledging that you need help beyond your human capacity, with admitting that you cannot navigate what is coming without divine intervention, with humbling yourself before heavenly authority and saying with genuine desperation that you require the covering that only angelic forces can provide and the shielding that only supernatural power can establish around your life, your family, your home, your resources, your health, your mind, your emotions, your future, and your eternal destiny. This acknowledgement is not mere words spoken into the air hoping something magical will happen, but a heart posture that positions you in alignment with the flow of divine grace, that opens spiritual channels through which angelic assistance can move on your behalf, that activates covenant promises that have been established from the foundation of the world for moments exactly like this when the righteous cry out and heaven responds with overwhelming intervention that defies natural explanation, and demonstrates supernatural power working in favor of those who trust in divine protection rather than relying on their own limited ability to defend themselves. When you cry out to the God of angel armies, when you call upon the name that is above every name, when you invoke the blood of Christ that was shed to purchase your redemption and guarantee your protection, you are not engaging in religious formality but releasing spiritual authority that the forces of darkness must recognize and respond to by retreating from their assault on your life because they have no legal right to continue attacking someone who has come under the covering of divine covenant and position themselves under the shadow of the Almighty where no weapon formed against you can prosper and no scheme devised against you can succeed. Right, I am nothing without you, Lord, if He is the breath that gives you strength. The specific actions required to activate this protection are straightforward but must be executed with intentionality and faith, not as superstitious formula but as genuine engagement with living spiritual reality. First, You must speak aloud a declaration of faith that announces to the spiritual realm your decision to place yourself under divine protection, that proclaims your trust in heavenly authority over your life, that asserts your identity as a child of God who has inherited the right to angelic assistance and supernatural defense because of what Christ accomplished through his death and resurrection. This declaration might sound something like this: I call upon the God of heaven and earth, the Creator of all things, the Father of lights from whom every good gift comes, and I declare that I am placing myself and all that concerns me under the protection of divine authority in this moment. I invoke the blood of Jesus Christ as my covering and my shield against every form of attack from the kingdom of darkness. I request and receive the assignment of warrior angels to surround me and guard me in all my ways. I submit myself to the leading of the Holy Spirit and the guidance of heavenly messengers who have been sent to direct me through the dangerous season ahead. I reject every strategy of the enemy against my life, my family, my resources, and my future. I declare that I will not be a casualty of the coming tragedy but a testimony of divine faithfulness and supernatural protection. I receive this now by faith, and I thank you that it is already established in the spiritual realm and manifesting in my natural circumstances. Second, you must take a physical action that corresponds to your spiritual declaration. Something tangible that demonstrates your faith is not mere mental agreement but genuine trust that produces obedience. This might involve anointing your home with oil while praying for angelic protection over your dwelling place. It might involve creating a physical reminder that you place somewhere visible to keep your attention focused on divine covering throughout each day. It might involve fasting for a specific period to intensify your spiritual sensitivity and strengthen your connection to heavenly guidance. It might involve giving a sacrificial offering that demonstrates your trust in divine provision. Even in the face of economic uncertainty, or it might involve any number of specific actions that the Holy Spirit directs you to take as your personal step of faith that activates the promise of protection in your unique circumstances. The key is not the specific action itself but the heart of obedience behind it, the willingness to do something that requires you to move beyond comfortable passivity and demonstrate through physical deed that you are serious about receiving what heaven is offering and committed to cooperating with divine strategy for your preservation. Third, you must maintain a posture of spiritual vigilance that keeps you connected to heavenly communication and responsive to angelic guidance as circumstances unfold, because divine protection is not a one-time inoculation that requires no further attention but an ongoing relationship that demands continuous awareness and willingness to adjust your path according to supernatural direction. This means developing the discipline of starting each day with acknowledgement of your dependence on divine protection and intentional listening for any specific instructions the Spirit might give you about people to avoid, places not to go, decisions to postpone, opportunities to seize, warnings to heed, or actions to take that might seem unusual or even irrational from a natural perspective but are actually strategic moves directed by heavenly intelligence that sees what you cannot see and knows what you do not know about the dangers surrounding you and the divine path of safety that winds through them. So many casualties of past tragedies could have been avoided if people had simply listened to the internal witness that warned them not to take a certain flight, not to be in a particular location at a specific time, not to proceed with a planned transaction, not to trust a certain individual. But they dismissed these promptings as mere anxiety or superstition rather than recognizing them as angelic intervention attempting to steer them away from disaster. Fourth, you must share this warning with others who are connected to you, not in a spirit of religious obligation or superstitious fear-mongering, but in genuine love and compassion for people whose lives are also in danger from the approaching tragedy and who deserve the same opportunity for divine protection that you are receiving through this message. The divine strategy often involves networks of protection where those who have received warning become conduits of that warning to others, creating expanding circles of safety as more and more people align themselves with heavenly covering and position themselves under angelic defense. You may be the only source through which certain people in your sphere of influence will encounter this information, the only voice that will speak to them with enough authority and credibility that they will actually listen and respond, the only connection through which divine mercy will reach them before the window closes and the tragedy strikes with full force. This is not about pressuring people or manipulating them through fear, but about lovingly and clearly presenting the reality of what is coming and the availability of protection, then allowing them to make their own choice about whether they will receive it or reject it, knowing that you have fulfilled your responsibility to share what you have been given and their response is between them and heaven. The protection I am describing is comprehensive, covering every dimension of your existence that might be vulnerable to attack during the coming tragedy. There is protection for your physical body against disease, accident, violence, and premature death that has not been ordained by divine timing. There is protection for your mind against the psychological warfare that will be waged through media manipulation, mass hysteria, and demonic oppression designed to drive people into mental breakdown and emotional collapse. There is protection for your relationships against the betrayals and conflicts that will tear families and friendships apart under the pressure of catastrophic circumstances. There is protection for your resources against the economic devastation that will wipe out the unprepared and leave them destitute and desperate. There is protection for your home against natural disasters, criminal activity, and supernatural attacks that target your place of dwelling. There is protection for your children against the particular dangers that will be aimed at the next generation to corrupt, destroy, or steal them from their divine destiny. And there is protection for your eternal soul against the deception and apostasy that will sweep through religious communities as people abandon faith under pressure and embrace lies that promise relief but deliver damnation. I must now shift from describing what is available to those who respond to warning you about what awaits those who ignore this divine communication, who dismiss this urgent appeal, who choose to continue in their current state without seeking the protection that is being freely offered before it is too late to access it. This is not punishment from a vindictive deity who enjoys watching humans suffer, but rather the natural consequence of refusing supernatural assistance when facing threats that are beyond human capacity to overcome, the inevitable result of rejecting divine wisdom when navigating circumstances that require heavenly guidance to survive. The tragic outcome of spiritual pride that insists on self-sufficiency even when confronted with evidence that self-effort will not be enough to withstand what is coming. The casualties of this approaching tragedy will not be random victims of blind fate but rather individuals who had opportunity for protection and chose not to take it, who heard warning and chose to ignore it, who were shown a path of safety and chose to walk a different direction, and their suffering will be intensified by the knowledge that it was preventable, that it was avoidable, that it was needless because provision had been made and they simply failed to receive it. Let me paint a picture for you of what awaits those who read these words and then close them without taking action, who feel the stirring of spiritual urgency but suppress it with rationalizations and excuses, who recognize the truth of what is being communicated but decide that tomorrow will be soon enough to respond, or next week will be time enough to get serious. Or eventually they will get around to seeking divine protection but not right now because life is busy and other things seem more pressing, and surely the tragedy will not strike before they have a chance to prepare themselves later. These individuals will find themselves caught completely off guard when the first waves of catastrophe begin to crash into their lives, utterly unprepared when the attacks they were warned about materialize with devastating precision, desperately scrambling for help that would have been readily available if they had sought it when it was being offered but is now much more difficult to access because they are trying to find shelter after the storm has already begun rather than taking cover before the first drops of rain started to fall. They will cry out to heaven with desperation born of dire circumstances, and God will still hear them because divine mercy extends even to those who ignored warning until crisis forced them to seek help, but their journey will be much more difficult, their path much more painful, their losses much more severe than if they had simply responded when the initial alert was sounded and positioned themselves under protective covering before the enemy launched his assault. The specific consequences will vary depending on what particular dimension of the tragedy impacts each individual most directly, but there are common threads that will run through the experiences of all who fail to take divine protection seriously. There will be financial devastation that leaves people wondering how they will provide basic necessities for themselves and their families, watching savings evaporate and income sources dry up while bills continue to demand payment and needs continue to multiply without any visible solution on the horizon, leading to stress that breaks down health, destroys relationships, and pushes people toward desperate decisions that create even more problems in a downward spiral of increasing desperation. There will be health crises that strike suddenly and severely, conditions that baffle medical professionals because they do not respond to conventional treatment, symptoms that multiply and intensify despite the best efforts of healthcare systems that are themselves overwhelmed by the sheer volume of cases presenting with mysterious ailments that seem to have spiritual components interwoven with physical manifestations, leaving people trapped in bodies that no longer function properly and minds that can no longer process clearly while they search desperately for relief that continues to elude them because the root of their problem is spiritual but they are only addressing the natural symptoms. There will be relationship destruction on a scale that leaves people isolated and alone precisely when they most need support and connection, betrayals by those they trusted most deeply, abandonments by those who pledged loyalty and commitment. Conflicts that erupt over seemingly minor issues but escalate into permanent breaches because the stress of circumstances has stripped away the grace and patience that normally allow people to navigate differences and disagreements, resulting in broken families, shattered friendships, divided communities, and individuals who find themselves facing the worst crisis of their lives without the emotional and practical support system they thought they could count on when trouble arrived. There will be mental and emotional breakdowns that leave people unable to function in normal daily activities, paralyzed by anxiety that reaches levels of intensity they never imagined possible, drowning in depression that sucks all color and hope from their perception of reality, tormented by fears that multiply in their minds until they cannot distinguish between genuine threats and imagined dangers, experiencing panic attacks that convince them they are dying even though medical tests show nothing physically wrong, and generally spiraling into psychological chaos that robs them of peace, joy, clarity, productivity, and the ability to be present for others who depend on them. There will be spiritual deception that leads people away from truth and into doctrines of demons that promise peace but deliver bondage, religious movements that appear to offer solutions but actually ensnare followers in systems of control and manipulation, false prophets who perform signs and wonders to establish credibility but ultimately guide people away from genuine relationship with the divine and into worship of created things rather than the Creator, philosophies that sound enlightened and sophisticated but strip people of the simple faith that actually connects them to supernatural power and protection, and wholesale apostasy among those who once claimed to follow Christ but abandon that profession when following Him requires sacrifice, suffering, or standing firm against popular opinion and cultural pressure. There will be persecution of genuine believers who refuse to compromise their convictions, who continue to proclaim truth in environments that have become hostile to it, who maintain their allegiance to divine authority in contexts that demand conformity to human systems that oppose heavenly values. And this persecution will range from social exclusion and economic discrimination to actual physical violence depending on how far the forces of darkness are permitted to advance in their war against the people of God. Comment: Jesus, be my unshakable defender, if you trust His covering and protection.